Welcome back, guys. And in this video, I want to share 5 biggest common mistake that I see many people, especially beginners, that do when starting out to program. So, without further ado, let us dive in and see this mistake. Mistake number one: many beginners want to learn the framework without necessarily learning the basic building block of that framework. This is what I mean. You find someone wants to learn Laravel, Flask, Django without learning the building block, the language that is used to build that framework. For example, Laravel is built on PHP. Flask is built on Python. Yeah. So you want to have a good, solid understanding of the language before you dive into framework. This is key because while using the framework, you reach a certain point whereby the framework becomes more complex and requires a good understanding of the language that builds that framework, right? And if you do not have a good understanding of the language that builds the framework, then this will mean you'll have to go again back to learn the basic of this framework, which is, as you see, is a waste of time and a waste of effort. Before you even consider diving in and start learning a framework, just learn the basic of that language that builds that framework, and it will help you to have a more solid understanding of the framework and to just be a better programmer while using that framework. So the second mistake is that I see many people, especially beginners, they learn too many languages at one time. So you find someone is learning Java, is learning Python, is learning PHP, and at the end of the day, they just become a jack of many trades but a master of none. What I've seen over the years is that when you become very good at one particular language, one particular framework, it gives you a good foundation, and that will help you to have a smooth transition when moving to a new language or a new framework. This is because if you understand inheritance, if you understand classes, if you understand polymorphism in one language, then it will be quite easy for you to understand this in another language. So just make sure you have a solid understanding of one language. You stick to one language before you actually consider diverting or learning many languages in one particular time. The mistake number three is that I see many people when start learning a language or a framework, they follow the documentation step by step. I don't think, for me, if this is necessary. I think the thing that is most necessary is that you dive in and start building a project. And in the process, the project will just reveal, the most important parts and the paramount for that framework. And as such, this will help you, just to refer to the documentation only when you're stuck, and just to have a clear understanding of the building blocks or the most important parts of that framework. You do not need to, you do not need to follow the documentation step by step. And sometimes even this will cause you to just be stuck in things like a variable for quite a long time without necessarily having a good understanding of the major important part of that language or framework. I will not encourage anyone to follow the documentation step by step, but rather to dive into a project and start building a project, and then while building that project you'll be able to go back to the documentation only to refer to the things that you're not quite clear about. Number four is that I have seen many beginners when they're into programming for quite some months, they develop arrogance. Someone just becomes arrogant and doesn't want to learn from other people. And this is one of the signs of a downfall of a developer. When someone just becomes arrogant and he presumes he knows everything, is that over time, he closes his ears to good advice concerning programming, and many of the invaluable advice that will help him to advance to the next level. And as such, you find someone is not quite clear with something, but because of arrogance, he doesn't want to ask, he doesn't want, get information from more experienced developers. He doesn't want to share even with his developers. Yeah. So I think if you want to advance quite fast in your programming career, then learn to be humble, learn to learn from people, learn to share, learn to accept that you have done mistakes. As such, this will help you to understand the industry fast and also to learn most of the important things from people very, very fast. And the mistake that I see many beginners do when learning programming is that someone waste a lot of time in beautifying the IDE. They spend a lot of time just to make the code be very beautiful. I'm not saying it is bad. It is good just for your environment, your coding environment to look good. But don't waste a lot of time, configuring Android Studio, configuring Visual Studio Code, as this may end up just, wasting a lot of time without necessarily doing something constructive. What you want to do is that make sure everything is set up clearly, and then just understand some quite few commands that will help you to be efficient in programming, then dive straight away into coding. Yeah, you don't want to waste a lot of time just beautifying your coding environment, and then at the end of the day you have nothing to show or concerning what you have done with that Android Studio or Visual Studio Code. I don't think if it is quite necessary for you to spend a lot of time, just beautifying and just setting up your Visual Studio Code, but rather just do the basic setup and start coding. Many of these things, like the shortcuts, like beautifying your code, will come over time as you progress with coding. So guys, you want to avoid these 5 mistakes as possible as you can. And so if you like this video, please leave a like, please leave a comment, please share and subscribe. And until we meet again, guys, bye bye.